Hello friends, how are you? My name is Hurray and today I'm going to talk about the events that lead to Ragnarok and what happens during this catastrophic event. I've dedicated this first month of this new year to Ragnarok, and on the previous videos I have already given you a little bit of information. And today let's just take a look at the mythological accounts. As you know, and as I've already told you, what Ragnarok describes is a cyclical end of the world, after which follows a new creation, and this keeps happening over and over again. In other words, unlike the end of days prophecy from the Bible, which creation and destruction are opposite ends of a straight line, in the Norse mythology creation and destruction are points at opposite ends of a circle, and the story keeps going. So giving this comprehension of what Ragnarok is, a cycle of birth, life, death and rebirth, we might understand the meaning of the term Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods as it is often heard, an idea that came from the famous composer Richard Wagner, and it's a term that it's being put aside by the scientific community, but the term actually makes sense. I'm not sure if that was Richard Wagner's idea, but twilight can be applied because it expresses how the pre-Christian Norse perceived twilight, the end of a day, the coming of darkness, changing of seasons, every waning of the moon and another rising of the sun. Well, a constant cycle. But of course, nowadays we have other interpretations, because the study of the sources and the deep meaning of mythologies keeps going. Today we might understand Ragnarok as the judgment of the gods, the destiny of the gods, but these concepts tend to focus on a Christian perspective, and as I've told you on previous videos, well, there is a destiny of course, but there is no judgment. Alright, so now let's take a look at the events of Ragnarok. As you know, it starts with the prophecies of what will be the destiny of the gods and the cosmos. But there isn't a specific order in the sources. Some even don't include certain events, while others give us a few more details. But reading all the sources, we can come up with a sequence, more or less. It starts with Baldr's nightmares, the son of Hurray and Frigga, a god associated with light, purity, beauty and almost perfection, a god loved by all, especially the Aesir. So Baldr dreams of his death and part of the coming events of Ragnarok. The gods arranged the protection of Baldr against all things except the mistletoe. Well, the point of this video isn't to talk about Baldr, I'll leave that for another video, but it's important to refer this aspect in the life cycle of Baldr because he will play the most important role of all in the end. The gods know about the prophecies and do everything to postpone their doom, and prepare themselves, of course, for the coming battle. Eventually, Loki deceives the blind god Hurray and tricks him into killing Baldr, and with this event, chaos is unleashed. The gods completely lose their minds, and out of fear and despair, their actions will bring their doom. Blind was the god Hurray, but it was the gods that couldn't see beyond this tragic event, and their grief and hatred and thirst for vengeance blinded them. They make one of Loki's sons kill his own brother, and with grief and madness the surviving son is driven off. The other sons of Loki, such as Fenrir and Jormungandr and Hel, all had been placed either in chains or exiled or cast aside. Loki was poorly judged and was imprisoned by his actions and forced to be tortured forever, while his wife, Sigyn, out of love and loyalty, also had her life completely torn apart, not only because she lost a son and the other was driven mad, but also because she had her own torture to endure the pain of her beloved husband. The gods completely ruined Loki's household, and in all their attempts to prevent their doom, in their grieving madness they created precisely the enemies that would bring their downfall. The gods lost their ability of being wise and just, and in uncontrollable rage, they sealed their doom. These chains of events started the beginning of Ragnarok. The wolf's skull and Hati, sons of Fenrir, will devour the sun and the moon. The world will be consumed by utter darkness. 3 winters will follow with no other season in between. 3 roosters will crow. The rooster Fjallar, belonging to the giant Hekter, maybe referring to the world of the giants. The rooster Jolunkambi in Valhalla, maybe referring to the realm of the gods. And the final one, the soot-red rooster from hell, referring to the underworld. A call announcing the beginning of the end. Dreadful news spread all over the cosmos. Ragnarok will occur in the so-called age of the wolves, Varghold, an allusion to Skull and Hati. However, in the poem Vodospa, it is mentioned that the age of the wolves will be preceded by 3 other ages: the age of the axes, Skolgjold, the age of the swords, Skalmold, and the age of the winds, Vindhold. These 3 ages will be marked by wars, disorder, immorality, all desperate times. After these events, and mind that the order I chose here is not the correct order in some accounts. The order of events vary, but in the long run this is what happens. Anyway, after these events, the giants march against the gods. Loki will lead the army of the dead, the wolf Fenrir is set loose, the world serpent will make the earth shake, in its own accord will bring destruction upon the world, the giant Surt comes out of Muspelheim and leads his own army against the gods. So in other words, there is no turning back. The gods are powerless and surrounded, and they must fight. The god Heimdall will sound the great horn Gjallarhorn, announcing the inevitable conflict. Huden will visit Mimir's well to ask for guidance and counsel. And it's interesting, this aspect, because being the king of the gods, the all-powerful and wise, he is desperate and no longer knows what to do and must seek wisdom in others. The very god whose decisions to bring the downfall of Loki's household were made by impulse. Rage and despair clouded his judgment, and he ended up bringing doom to himself and all the gods, bringing precisely what he so hard tried to prevent. An interesting account where we can see the pre-Christian concept of the god Huden, because he only became the god associated with wisdom and kingship after Christianity. So in this account we can still see the remnants of a pagan past, when he wasn't as wise as the tales say, but just another god which, in his own imperfection, we see ourselves reflected. Huden knows that he will meet death in the battlefield, but he goes all the same. He fights the great wolf Fenrir and dies. He doesn't cower behind walls or behind his army. He goes forward into battle to meet his death. Now this is the true god of war and death. He is aware of his destiny, and if this is going to be his final battle, well, let's make it memorable. Vidar, son of Huden, kills the great wolf, avenging his father. Tur fights the great world serpent and kills it, but dies because of the creature's poison. Freyr fights against Surt and dies, and this account is interesting because in another mythological account, Freyr had a wonderful sword which fought by itself, but he gave away this sword when he got in love with his soon-to-be wife. The story of losing his sword because he is in love and wants the woman of his dreams and actually gives away the sword for her may be an indication of old traditions concerning marriage in Northern Europe, giving away a precious object as a wedding gift. The sword that could have saved his life, he gave it away for love. After all, he is the god of love, sex and fertility. Quite romantic, but he was destined to fight Surt and die. Another god that, no matter what, he would have to face his destiny. There is no escaping, and even honing a powerful sword, it was inevitable losing it, so he could die at Ragnarok. All the other gods meet their match and die. Tyr fights the wolf Garm, Hel's wolf, Heimdall fights against Loki and both die, and much like the New Year's Eve after a few drinks, the stars will fall from the sky, great confusion and chaos, everything burns and utter darkness remains. But in the end, it's not really the end of everything. Remember that Ragnarok is a continuous cycle, so after darkness the world regenerates itself from the catastrophes that have occurred. The waters will descend, the plants will grow again, the eagles will return to fish among the cliffs, and life sprouts once again. Humans will come forth once again. The surviving gods make counsel to bring harmony and order into the world, and Baldr returns from the underworld, bringing a new light upon the world and set himself as king of the gods. Now remember when Baldr died, and after death he was sent to the underworld and there remained protected? What if that was the plan all along? What if Hurray, in his seemingly madness and clouded judgment, he was actually wise and orchestrated Baldr's death so his son could be really protected in the underworld until the end of Ragnarok? And thus Odin ensured that the cycle of life continued by letting Baldr reign. What if this was Loki's plan and he was actually concerned about the cycle of life? In other accounts we see that Loki isn't order or chaos, but something in between which keeps the balance, and his job was precisely to create chaos so that order could come again in the end. What if this was a plan by Odin and Loki and remained a secret between the two gods? It might be the hidden truth of all these stories, but because, like all the other mythological accounts, Ragnarok shows us that there must always exist order and chaos, and forces in between to keep the balance and to keep the cycle of all things running. Alright friends, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have enjoyed this video. This was the last video about Ragnarok. You are probably tired of this subject already, so let's move on to another subject on the next video, of course. All the links to my social media are down below at the description. Thank you so much for watching and see you on the next video. Tack för idag!